It's great to welcome to the program today Michal Rozwarski, who's an economist, trade union researcher, and also author of The People's Republic of Walmart, which is a very interesting book, particularly in two contexts for me. I mean, one is, of course, just generally thinking about the way now, Michal, in which socialism is again sort of part of the discussion in the United States in particular, and about the misunderstanding that exists about the so-called sort of independence of a lot of these major corporations from government support.
Yep.
But also in light of many of the recent protests around companies like Amazon and Walmart specifically. So just to kind of introduce people who maybe don't yet know the frame in which you're writing about Walmart and these big companies, in what ways do these companies resemble planned economies?
Yeah, that's a good question. Basically, internally, they are sort of miniature planned economies, and we're not used to thinking about them that way. We're used to thinking that we live in the market economy, and there's market relationships. You go to Walmart, you buy something for a price, and you exchange money, and the price goes up and down. But we forget that the person who works at Walmart, for example, doesn't go up to their boss and say, I'll stock that shelf for $3.50 today, but maybe $4 tomorrow. They just get told what to do, and that happens up and down the corporation. Decisions are made, based on sort of rational, purposeful decision making, rather than this sort of blind market forces. So any large corporation, really, we use Walmart and Amazon because they're large and people know them, and they're also consumer sort of facing corporations, which historically has been the argument has been that this is had been the harder thing to plan. But really, whether it's GE or even large public enterprises like our healthcare system here in Canada or the NHS in the UK, internally, really so much of our already existing economy is already planned. So our book really has two core ideas. One is that planning already exists on a large scale, but the second is that it's largely undemocratic, authoritarian, within a Walmart or an Amazon, and that it could be done very differently.
So do you make a value judgment about whether one way or the other is better for the different parties that are involved? Or do you take the approach that, hey, without making a value judgment, we just need to call things what they are, and the ways in which a lot of these corporations are functioning is not the sort of free market, supply and demand driven meme that has been spread?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both, and I think that's I think it's good that you raise both. I mean, I think an important part of the book really is just about calling things what they are and using these case studies to drill down and to look at what really makes Walmart or Amazon run. What does even Walmart's relationship with its suppliers look like? Where if you go into the we did it so you don't have to go into the boring operations research literature and all of this. Walmart's relationship with its suppliers even less and less resembles a market, but what many of the scholars who look at it call sort of a firmification. So integration of suppliers into a sort of bigger plan built on information sharing and trust. So really looking at what are these economic relationships, even as they exist today, even under capitalism, where we were told after the end of the Cold War that planning had failed and it'll never work. Lo and behold, it's everywhere around us. But then going further and trying to make some of those value judgments, or at least evaluate, what is it about planning under capitalism that might be limiting of people and might be producing, a lot of exploitation and unfreedom and all the regular things a lot of the regular problems that we think of.
Yeah,
In our
can you talk a little bit about that relationship that a company like Walmart has with its suppliers of products? Because this is actually a super interesting entire other area that's separate from the relationship with employees, which is that we imagine a company has a product that they make and want to sell, and they go to Walmart and they say, here's what we offer the product for at wholesale, here's what we recommend you sell it at retail, can we do business? And it's sort of this relationship in which both parties have a relatively similar amounts of sort of negotiating power, and everybody comes away the better as a result of it. But these relationships that Walmart has with its suppliers are often quite different from that, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think it's good that you mentioned power as well. I mean, I think power is really important here, and Walmart has a lot of economic power. So it is, in some ways, it's able to sort of, bludgeon its suppliers and kind of and squeeze out these low prices that then consumers get. But they're squeezing them out exactly not in that sort of traditional way that quarter by quarter, year after year, that will just make these new contracts. It is this kind of extension of planning down the supply chain to the level where it's not another way of putting it in the literature is often that it's not really as much pull inflation that consumers saying we need X, letting Walmart determine that they need X bottles of shampoo or whatever, but kind of push inflation where Walmart and its suppliers are determining what will be on special, and based on trends in consumer needs and all of that, they're going to be actually setting sort of the mix of products and the amounts and pushing them into stores, and to the level where Walmart will often have these deep relationships with its suppliers where there might be the IT systems might be integrated. There might even be Walmart staff in some of the production facilities. Amazon does something similar with a program called Vendor Flex, where again there's actually employees of Walmart or Amazon at, say, Johnson & Johnson or something like that are helping sort of set the parameters for production itself.
There's this fascinating statistic when we look at the 100 top global economies, where, if I recall correctly, 69 are actually businesses, not countries. In other words, 69 of the biggest 100 economies are actually individual corporations rather than nation states. Is this something that should push us in the direction of maybe thinking about nation states and corporations more similarly, rather than completely distinguishing them and evaluating nation states in a completely different way than we evaluate corporations? Because a lot of people will hear you and I talking and they'll say, okay, but David, just because a lot of big corporations plan centrally in a way that seems to resemble some of the ways in which countries have historically had central planning doesn't mean that we should interpret that central planning in a similar way. Maybe the lines are actually a little bit blurrier there.
They're definitely blurrier. I mean, I think there's still lots of differences, but it's an argument about the scale of the planning, the complexity, and really its ubiquity. I think we have to look at both that blurring of lines between nations and corporations, but in general, looking at our entire economic system. We have a line, our entire economic system and what share of it is planned and what share of it is sort of already sort of subject to conscious control. We have a line from Herbert Simon, who was an economist, Nobel Prize winner, mostly a pretty mainstream economist. But he said he had this sort of thought experiment where he said, imagine a Martian coming in from outer space and looking down at the Earth first, and he drew two sort of pictures, and he said, what they see sort of green blobs connected by thin red lines, and the green blobs being areas of planning and the red lines being sort of market relationships, or would they see, really a network of red lines with, specks of green? And he said it would be the former. You'd really see, if someone was coming in and didn't really understand our social institutions, if we sort of looked at them with new eyes, we'd really see that there's these big centers of economic planning throughout, how we produce and distribute everything from healthcare to toothbrushes, to Caterpillar machines, to anything else. And they're connected by these thin red lines of market relationships, where it's the centers of planning that are really more important. If you look at the economy, with sort of fresh eyes.
Who doesn't end up exploited in this system? Because I'm thinking, we know about the stories of employees and how they are often dependent on government subsidies because wages are quite low, working conditions are not particularly good in Amazon warehouses. Often scheduling is a power dynamic where the employee has relatively little control. So we know about that. Walmart has huge power to exploit suppliers, where they say, yeah, well, now that we are 95% of your buying of your sales, we need you to reduce the cost to us by 10%. And now it's the supplier that needs to figure out whether or how that's even possible. In a sense, the government is also actually exploited because they are subsidizing the low wages of many of the employees through social welfare programs, which if the employees earned higher wages, they wouldn't have to. Like it seems like it's basically executives and shareholders who end up getting the majority of the gains.
Yeah, and I mean, in a way, yes, because that's capital, that's capitalism, right? That's capitalism, baby, and that's how it works. I mean, in terms of Walmart and Amazon specifically, you could say that consumers get a bonus because they get lower prices, but we have to remember that as you said, consumers are also workers. They don't have to be workers at Amazon or Walmart. They might be workers at the suppliers. They might be family members of workers. In a way, the system is set up to produce things at low cost, to lower labor costs, to ignore labor standards. And I think the important thing for us is there's definitely conscious decision making going on here. Partly it's a certain logic of the economic system, but because of the degree of planning, there are people who are making decisions that we are going to do things in this way, and that's not the majority of us. It's it's who you said, sort of. It's the shareholders and executives. So we have this shared capacity for decision making, and we think it's a normal thing that we exercise this shared capacity for decision making, say in the political sphere, where we now have representative democracy. It's still very incomplete, and there's lots of problems with it, but there's at least this notion that everyone should be able to express their voice, right? And it's often not as fully as it can be, and it's especially in the U.S. it's along racial lines where you have lots of flat out discouragement of voting and all of that. But when we look at the economic sphere, that this sort of idea that we have this shared capacity for decision making, and that we could be using it to together kind of rationally again plan and think about what goals we want to accomplish and how we want to do that, really disappears.
What's the lowest hanging fruit in terms of improvements that could be made? Because a lot of the specific policy ideas that are often mentioned, I find to basically be band-aids. So when we talk about, well, universal basic income, that will help a lot of people. It doesn't fundamentally change the relationship between a lot of the players in the system that we have. A $15 minimum wage, sort of similar analysis would apply. More representation by trade unions, maybe, although there are, pros and cons to that. What do you see as the most direct and simple paths towards improving circumstances?
I mean, I think from the perspective of our book, I mean, I think things like the Medicare for All campaign in the U.S., which is, different than in other parts of the world, which already have sort of socialized medicine, is an important step. Because it says, let's take an entire sector of the economy and let's actually subject it to more sort of conscious planning, right? Let's take healthcare out of the market. And even though the large insurers and the large healthcare providers are already internally planned, this level of kind of social control and social decision making over this system as a whole is really limited. I'm up in Canada. We already have socialized medicine, but it's very incomplete. We don't have a pharmacare system. Again, another huge area of the economy where corporations are making huge profits, providing a very socially useful and necessary good that isn't socialized. We have huge issues with childcare, where again, that's another whole sector of the economy that could be taken out of the market and sort of decommodified. So I think part of the solution is taking these sort of larger areas of the economy, and making the case for saying, let's actually do the planning in a democratic way.
The book is called The People's Republic of Walmart. We've been speaking with the book's author, Michal Rozworski. Thank you so much for talking to us about this really important issue.
Thanks so much for having me on, David.